So I'm on the front porch of my little cabin up north, and I wondered why there was sawdust on the floor there and on a chair that I had sitting under there. So I thought, well, it must have come down from up above. And so I looked up here. I saw, look at that. There's a little round hole up there. I thought, what would make that little round hole? I thought maybe a woodpecker. That doesn't make sense. Then I looked, there's another little hole there, and that one had a bug sticking out of it. And so I zapped it with hornet and wasp spray. And here it is down here. You can't see a lot of contrast when it's a black bug sitting on a black bucket. Let's get it over here. And that is a carpenter bee. I looked it up. Apparently they dig holes in wood so that they can lay eggs in there. And so now that's one more thing to think about and worry about and try to prevent with my cabin out in the woods. So just a little update. Carpenter bees. Hey, this is Dave. I'm at Lake Michigan again. It's June 8th. And still, I look back, I take a walk down the beach for a half hour. I would expect to see people camping up there in the woods, up in the dunes. But I've not encountered any campers in the dunes yet. That's very unusual. Now there are a few people up there to the north of me. I walked from the parking lot about a half hour down the beach. And I see there are a few people down there to the south of me also, although they're far enough away I'm sure you can't see them. So still pretty sparse, a lot more sparse than I'd expected at Lake Michigan on June 8th, but happy to be here. So this is the roof of my cabin up north, and you can see, yeah, there's the chimney for the wood burning stove, and it's got this little boot that's professionally down there and stuff. And that's all great. And I thought, hey, this thing is a year old. It's a metal roof. I never have to worry about it. It'll never leak. Last night we had lots and lots and lots of rain. I mean, just poured like hour after hour after hour. But I thought, cool, this thing doesn't leak. Well, this morning, while it was still raining, I was doing some stuff inside. And I got back to the back end of the cabin to move some stuff so I could get at what I wanted to do, and there was a puddle on the floor. And no, it wasn't because I got up during the night and didn't want to go outside. Something leaked. And so I did some research online as to why these things might leak, and usually they say almost always it's because one of these little screws goes bad, it rusts or it backs out. And somebody did say if you put these into plywood, they're likely to back out. And a bunch of these are into plywood. So I came up here and I looked around to see, oh, am I going to find a screw that's backed out or something? And I found underneath what's now a whole bunch of caulk, there's a little hole in this part of the roof. And it just looked as if somebody had put a screw in there and then didn't want it there, they backed it out and then didn't put anything in. And it's just on the edge, kind of underneath this little ridge, but not quite underneath, just really on the edge. So I can see if it got some rain, but not too much, probably it wouldn't go in the hole. But when it rains really hard, hour after hour after hour after hour, I think that's where a bunch of rain went in the hole and then came into the cabin. So you can see I took a bunch of caulk and I just crammed it down the hole, crammed more in, crammed more in, crammed more in. And then crammed it underneath this little ledge here. And so I'm hoping that that's going to solve my problem. Now, I did read some things, people said, oh, don't put caulk on your metal roof. But, well, it's what I had, it's what I've done, and we'll see how it holds up. But I'll keep an eye on it. So that's the saga of the leaky, really new metal roof. Okay, so today we're testing out two new pieces of technology. First one is this remote mic, so hopefully you can get a little bit better sound than what you've been getting if I just talk and try to get my voice to reach the phone. The other one is this gadget, a can opener. So you saw a video before where I was opening a can with my Swiss Army knife, and my sister watched it and thought I was going to endanger myself with the jagged edge on the top of the can, and so she sent me this can opener. Thank you, Marilyn, for that. So we're going to test this out. Actually, I tried this last night with my can of corned beef hash and I failed, so we're going to see if we can make it work tonight with my can of chili. Alright, so put this over there, gauge this, and no. Okay, concentrate. Okay, got to hold it with one hand while I turn the crank with the other hand, and it's doing it. It's actually opening the can. See what happens when we get to this bent part that I messed up because I was too incompetent to figure out how to use a can opener. Okay, we've gone spot all the way around, turn this back. I still failed. As if I okay, it failed again. Okay, success. So, yeah, at first I messed up, got that little bent part in there, and so I had to get my Swiss Army knife and just pry this up a little bit, and sure enough, there it is, no jagged edge. Eventually I'll get good at this thing, but you know, there's a certain learning curve with can openers apparently. So that's it. I'm ready to put this into my jet boil and cook it up. June 9, on the shore of Lake Michigan. Still just about nobody here. It's very calm and eerily foggy. You can't see a lot just because that's the fog. You just can't see very far in either direction. I did hear a voice coming out of the fog a little while ago, probably just somebody getting eaten by a monster in the fog. And speaking of being eaten, since there's almost no breeze coming off the lake, the flies are coming out of the woods and consuming anyone who's standing still. And so I think I'm going to cut my walk a little short and head back while I still can before the flies get the best of me. So that's it here from the beach on June 9. Here are some things I've been doing inside of my cabin. I've been putting some insulation in the walls. You can see some insulation, some sheets of insulation here and in between some of the other studs. And then in the corner behind the wood burning stove, I've got some regular rolls of insulation. And then in that very corner I have cement board so that if we get a good hot fire and it heats up the stove, it's not going to catch anything on fire. I also put some cinder blocks on top of the wood burner to kind of soak up the heat and then stay warm for a while after the fire goes out. Just kind of help out with making the heat last longer. So as we go around here, I also have some drywall, and this is the blue board kind, so it does not get moldy. And then I still have some, not focusing, there we are, some of the regular bats of insulation in the walls. Now, the big thing was the ceiling. And I struggled for a while with what to do with the ceiling because I couldn't just put insulation in the ceiling. There are no soffit vents, and so it would catch moisture up there and get moldy. So what I finally did, see if it'll focus. Okay. I put these sheets of insulation on the ceiling, but they don't go all the way to the edges. And so on both sides, air can get up behind them and circulate over them and keep things dry up there. But hopefully when the fire's in the wood burning stove, the heat will go up and it'll get kind of caught. And yeah, it's not going to just seal it off, but it should make it escape a whole lot slower. Now, when I first did this, right above the wood burning stove, I put my hand on the sheets of insulation and it was pretty hot. That made me nervous. So I put some cement board up there on the ceiling also, right above the wood burning stove. And then when it's not above the wood burning stove, then I've got just the sheets of insulation. And that goes all the way around. And then on the one wall up there, I did this just today, I cut a hole in there. There we are, hole in the wall there. And I've got a vent on the outside. I've got screen and a regular vent cover. And then for the winter, I'll figure out some way of closing this up so it doesn't just let a bunch of cold air pour in. But I wanted better venting also to let heat out during the summer and just to let in some dry air so that it wouldn't get too damp in here. So that's what I've been doing. Okay, update on the roof. Last night we had another really hard rain. And you can see where the caulk is here that I put in yesterday. I've cleaned a bunch of this off because when it rained really hard last night, the roof still leaked. Not as bad as it had the night before, but it still leaked. So just closing this off in here, there's a little hole right underneath that ridge there. That did not stop the leak. So I came back out here and I looked, so what else is going on? And I noticed right here where this part of the roof comes down, and then there's a little flat spot, and then it's not lying flat on the next panel here. Up here at the top, I can get my finger in there a little bit. Now as you come down, then it lays flat. Even so, I would have thought that you're going to have this situation that either this panel would come up and kind of raise up underneath here so that water can't get up here and just come in, or at least there'd be some kind of a seal here so that water can't get underneath there, but there isn't. And I looked on the other side and it's the same situation, except on the other side this lies flat. I can't get my finger in there. So that's probably why it does not leak. Now who knows, maybe it'll leak in the future. Now, I could just fill this up with caulk, but I got frustrated, went back to Home Depot again this morning, and I got some tape. And it's tape that's made for roofs. And I saw on YouTube somebody doing something like this. And so I'm going to put some tape certainly over here and probably over this whole thing here and see if my roof leaking problem goes away. And who knows, long term I might have to actually hire some professional person to come in here and fix this. So much for the buy a metal roof and you never have to worry about leaks again. So come back again after I get tape on. Here we are with the tape on. So I did put tape over the screws too, just in case there's a problem there. I've got tape particularly going over that little hole that I found, and then over here where that ridge is, I've got actually 3 layers. I've got one layer that goes way up underneath there, and one that goes kind of across, and then another one that goes just all the way. And I took it, even though you don't have the really ridge all the way down, took it all the way down to the end. So I'm hoping that will stop the leak, at least until I can figure out, do I need to bring in somebody professional who will fix this thing right. But this is the tape that's made specifically for this purpose, and so I'm hoping that's going to stop the leak for now. There we are. Let me show you some of the things I've been doing around the campsite here. Well, first of all, I have some new posts up there, all ready to go to install a second solar panel. And I hope to get that installed the next time I come up here. Meanwhile, I planted last year a lavender plant right there. And it seemed to do okay last year, but then this year never came back. And in this area down here, I planted some peppermint seeds, hoping to grow peppermint plants, and some off in that area there too. But they never came up. And I wanted those things because they repel mosquitoes and they repel mice. So finally I gave up on those. And yesterday I went and I bought, this is another species of peppermint plant. And I looked it up on Google while I was in there, and it says that it repels mice and mosquitoes. And so we'll see if that takes off and hopefully spreads and helps alleviate the mice and mosquitoes. Speaking of mice, if you look around the campsite and look around this side of the side of the cabin, and kind of off in here, notice a lot of open space. And that's what I've been working on and making what's commonly called a mouse moat. The idea is you cut down all the little trees and all the ferns and stuff, and then the mice don't have a lot of cover, and they are afraid to run across this to get into the cabin, for fear that some predator will get them. And it kind of as part of that, I have made this area off in here that used to be all just jungle. And I've made it kind of a circle drive. So for a while I've just been pulling up behind the cabin and backing out, but now I made a circle drive. Goes around between the cabin and the old shack. And this down here used to be a fire pit. I filled it in and smoothed it over, and so now I can have a circle drive going around there. Now, the bummer, when I started using the circle drive, sorry I turned you too fast, was that I rode over this root. I damaged it. And that concerns me. Hopefully the whole tree will recover and be okay. But that's a root to that big maple tree. If that big maple tree were to die and fall down, it would probably fall off to the left there. It'd be very disastrous for the cabin. So I'll be keeping an eye on that tree to see if it stays healthy. So far it's great, but it bothers me that I damaged this root. I want it to stay nice and healthy. So that's kind of where things are right now. It's looking a lot more open, a lot less vegetation than there was a year ago. And with that, I'm ready to end my trip and head back for home.